Freddy versus Jason. The idea seems simple, doesn't it? Pitting two titans against each other has been around for decades. Whether it's Godzilla battling King Kong, Batman taking on Superman, or aliens taking on predators. The concept is one that's always intrigued fans, but nothing captured imaginations more than the idea of Freddy Krueger facing off against Jason Voorhees. Two killers who have a propensity to take down teenagers in increasingly horrific ways seems like a no-brainer. Yet why did it take a decade to go from this to this? Well, that's kind of a long story, and it's kind of mind-boggling. In fact, the murmurs of Freddy vs. Jason happened even before this tease. Remember New Blood, where it's essentially Jason versus Carrie? That was around the time this all began. Though depending on who you ask, it all began right after the first Nightmare on Elm Street came out. But obviously, Jason belonged to Paramount and Freddy belonged to New Line, so that wasn't going to happen. They would never just split the profits. Don't be crazy. Instead, each company tried to lobby to borrow the character for a fee, then not pay out for box office success. Yeah, I don't think that was ever going to fly either. However, that didn't prevent drafts from being made of the story. And let me just tell you now, they're bad. Like really, really bad. This is simply my opinion, but I can't believe how terrible these versions are. Now, I'm not going to shame these screenwriters one by one. I'm just going to go over some of these grand ideas that just don't work when it comes to combining these two franchises. 1. This retconning of the two titans' history by making Freddy a counselor at Camp Crystal Lake who drowned Jason. Why retcon either of these histories when they are both so cemented in our minds? It really just comes across as incredibly lazy. Not only that, but some of the drafts had Freddy molesting a young Jason. Yeah, wow. Then there was the draft where Jason was on trial for his crimes. That's right, a courtroom drama, because that seems like a right battleground for the legendary meeting of two killers. The less said of this draft, the better. Another element that kept popping up was this cult of Freddy worshippers, sometimes called the Fredheads. This is an element I just can't wrap my head around because, while it may have worked in a solo Nightmare outing, it mostly just serves as a substitute for Freddy scenes. Why would I want to watch this cult on screen when I could be watching the red and green sweater of our favorite burn victim instead? It's one of the scripts that just didn't seem to fully understand the concept of Freddy versus Jason. Finally, there was a constantly present finale where Jason and Freddy duel in hell. Usually in some type of boxing ring scenario. Everything about this is just a terrible idea, even with cameos from real-life killers like Ted Bundy and Hitler. Most of all, how the hell are they supposed to shoot this? Hell as a setting always ends up looking terrible on film, especially in a horror movie that's not intended to have a $100 million budget. Yet it kept coming up in these drafts, essentially setting themselves up for failure, not to mention a budget that no studio head would ever greenlight. These drafts never seemed to harbor any love for the two titans. Rather than honoring what came before them, they were mostly trying to create something completely different and end up being rather un-Nightmare or un-Friday. Eventually, New Line secured the rights to Friday, and everything seemed set. Only one problem. Sean Cunningham, the co-creator of the Friday the 13th franchise, and New Line couldn't agree on a script. And can you really blame them? Some of these ideas were truly awful. Then Damian Shannon and Marcus Swift enter the picture and show an understanding for the source material that is completely absent from prior drafts, which makes sense given the fact that they were actually fans of both franchises, a trait severely lacking in all prior screenwriters. They even had 8 rules to help govern the script and create the best film possible. Number 1. The new story must be set in the fictional universes of the Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street film franchises. Number 2. The story must remain faithful to existing mythologies and canon. Number 3. The new story's tone will be scary and fun, not campy and absurd. Number 4. Continuity must be maintained, aka both Freddy and Jason must be starting in hell/dead, which is where they were left off in their last respective films. Number 5. All non-slasher characters should be new. That means no Nancy Thompson or Tommy Jarvis. Number 6. The new plot must come from Freddy and Jason and not be a dream within a dream. Number 7. The kills must be evenly split in the distinct style of Freddy and Jason. Number 8. The new story needs to strive for a tonal balance, sometimes feeling like a Friday sequel, other times feeling like an Elm Street sequel. Sure, in the end, not all of these rules were exactly followed, like Jason far outweighing Freddy in terms of kills. Hell, we only really got one Freddy kill in the film, and a lot of Jason kills. Still, this shows the intent was there. But the sad thing about this is that Shannon and Swift had to fight to get this film made. The many drafts and sudden regime change at New Line meant they needed to pitch their film to executives all over again. It still took New Line polling the general public to see if there was interest. There was, but it was also recommended to be PG-13. Shannon and Swift fought this and are a big reason why we actually ended up with an R-rated venture in the end. That alone is reason enough to appreciate their work on this film. Did the end product turn out great? That's debatable. But I'd argue the script is hardly to blame. Sure, there's some stuff that comes across as silly, like the whole Jason being afraid of water thing, which the screenwriters contend was never the case and even insult those that interpret it that way. They argue that this scene takes place in Jason's subconscious, and the water represents a deep-seated fear of drowning, not the actual water itself, which I agree with. Unfortunately, this line gets rid of that notion entirely.
Freddy died by fire, Jason by water. How can we use that?
Now, I'm not entirely sure if that was in their final script, but it changes the entire minutia of this act here. So I understand the fan complaint. Not to mention all the times previous that Jason was in water. There's also the overly done exposition through dialogue that occurs an absurd amount in this movie.
Now this Jason Voorhees supposedly drowned at Camp Crystal Lake back in 1957 when he was 11 years old.
But again, not exactly the screenwriter's fault. The script was cut down by nearly a half hour by one of the most questionable writers in all of Hollywood, David S. Goyer. Gone were the subtle advancements of story, and in were lines like this.
How sweet, dark meat.
Mostly I'd say the lighting and tone are more to blame for the film not living up to its name. Ronnie Yu, the film's director, was clearly shooting for fun versus scary. And that can't really be blamed on the script. It had a lot going for it. Hell, it even had a Tommy Jarvis reference with him trying to warn the builders of this Crystal Lake condo that is essentially wiped from the final film. Again, thanks Goyer. Even then, Goyer can't be blamed for it all. Executives wanted a certain kind of film, especially given the fact that this was going to cost more than the first 8 Friday films combined. So they hired someone that didn't even like horror films to polish it up and give them what they wanted. Unfortunately, Shannon and Swift are often blamed for it, despite being huge cheerleaders for the film that the fans actually wanted, as evidenced by their rules. I still get a kick out of the Freddy vs. Jason film we got. Sure, it's downright silly at points, and almost feels like a Looney Tunes cartoon. But it finally gave us what we wanted, Jason and Freddy throwing down. And it wasn't in a boxing ring, so that one's a win for all of us.